What if the person smiling the brightest at your wedding was the same one quietly destroying the most important dress of your life and had no idea every second was being recorded? My name is Emma Caldwell, soon to be Emma Hayes, and that morning at Willow Creek Estate felt like something out of a dream I had waited years for. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the bridal suite, soft and golden, catching every detail of the lace on my custom wedding dress. It hung there like it belonged in a magazine, untouched, perfect, almost unreal. I remember thinking I had finally made it to the safest day of my life. Ryan was downstairs with the guests, and everything outside the suite buzzed with calm excitement. Inside, it was quiet enough to hear my own breathing. That's when Brooke knocked. Ryan's sister always had this way of smiling like she was on your side, no matter what. Warm, helpful, the kind of person who made you lower your guard without realizing it. She stepped in wearing that same familiar expression and gently offered to steam my dress so it would be flawless for the ceremony. I actually felt grateful. I even laughed lightly and told her she was a lifesaver. I remember handing it over without hesitation. That's the part that still plays in my mind the most. How easily trust can look like peace right before it breaks. Brooke carefully lifted the dress from its hanger, admiring it like any excited sister-in-law would. She asked a few small questions about the fabric, about how long it had taken to make. I answered everything, completely unaware that I was giving her time alone with something irreplaceable. I excused myself for just a few minutes to check on makeup timing downstairs, thinking nothing of it. The estate was full of people I trusted. Friends, love everywhere. Or so I believed. What I didn't know was that hidden cameras had already been placed in the suite weeks earlier. Not for drama, not for suspicion, but because something deep inside me had refused to ignore a feeling I couldn't explain. And in those few minutes I was gone. Everything I thought was safe quietly started to change. I had always been the one people described as supportive, the fun sister-in-law, the easy presence in every room. I learned how to smile in the right places, how to laugh at the right jokes, how to make myself look harmless, so no one ever looked too closely at what I was really feeling. But inside, something had been breaking for a long time, quietly and steadily, like glass under pressure. Ryan wasn't just Emma's fiancé to me. He was my big brother, the person who used to be my constant, the one who stood between me and everything I couldn't handle growing up. I didn't realize how much space he occupied in my life until Emma arrived, and slowly, unintentionally, filled every gap I used to stand in. At first I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was kind. She made him happy. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. It started with small things I pretended not to notice, conversations I wasn't included in, plans that no longer had room for me. The way Ryan's attention shifted, not suddenly, but permanently. Then came the engagement. The wedding. The future that felt like it was being written without me in it. I smiled through all of it, played my part, even helped Emma pick things she thought I cared about. But every step forward felt like another step away from me. Standing alone in the bridal suite with her wedding dress in my hands, I felt something in me finally tip over. The room was too quiet, too perfect, like it didn't understand what it was taking from me. The lace was soft, expensive, untouched. It wasn't just fabric in that moment. It felt like proof that I had already been replaced. My chest tightened. I looked toward the door, but no one was coming. No one was watching. That thought alone made everything inside me louder. I told myself it was unfair, that I had been pushed aside without anyone noticing, that I mattered too. Before I could think it through, my hands moved on their own. I grabbed the delicate lace train and tore it in one sharp motion. The sound was small, but it hit my ears like something irreversible. For a second, I just stood there frozen, breathing hard, staring at what I had done. "You don't deserve him," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. Then panic hit me like a wave. My heart started racing as reality caught up. I rushed to the drawer and found a small sewing kit, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely hold the needle. I tried to fix it, tried to line up the torn edges like nothing had happened. But the fabric refused to cooperate, slipping away from every desperate stitch. Tears blurred my vision as I kept going, convincing myself I could still turn it back into an accident if I worked fast enough. But even as I stitched, I already knew, some moments don't stay hidden, no matter how hard you try to repair them. At 8:40 a.m., I told myself I was only being cautious, nothing more. Just a quick check, a routine glance at the security feed I had quietly installed weeks earlier. I had convinced everyone, even myself, that it was for peace of mind at an event this big. But deep down, I knew there had been a reason I couldn't ignore the unease building in me for months. I opened the live footage on my phone while sitting alone in a quiet corner of the estate, still in my robe, hair half done, wedding energy building everywhere except inside me. At first everything looked normal. The bridal suite, sunlight, stillness, my dress hanging like it was waiting for its moment. Then I saw her. Brooke. She moved differently when no one was watching. That was the first thing I noticed. The polite posture was gone, replaced with something tense, restless. She stood too close to the dress, her hands hovering like she was deciding something she could not undo. And then she did it. She grabbed the lace train and tore it. There was no accident in her movement, no hesitation. It was deliberate, sharp, filled with emotion I had never seen her openly express before. I watched the fabric give way under her hands, watched something precious become damaged in seconds. My breath stopped without permission. My fingers tightened around the phone, but I didn't drop it. I couldn't. She whispered something I couldn't hear through the recording, but I didn't need audio to understand the intent on her face. It was anger. Deep, personal, held anger finally spilling out where it should never have been. Then came the part that hit harder than the tear itself. She tried to fix it, hands shaking, panic setting in, pulling out a small sewing kit like it could erase what had already been done. Watching her struggle to undo it made everything feel even more real. This wasn't a mistake. It was an attempt to cover one. For a moment my body went completely still. No tears came. No shock-induced gasp. Just a cold silence spreading through me, like something inside had locked into place. I replayed the footage once, then again, not because I doubted it, but because my mind was trying to catch up with what my eyes already understood. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. It was about everything I had ignored. Every strange glance, every subtle tension, every moment I told myself I was overthinking. It all aligned in a way that suddenly felt impossible to dismiss. I closed the video and carefully stood up. My hands were steady now, almost unnaturally so. I placed my phone down, walked to the dress, and gently zipped it into its protective cover, as if it were already something from the past. No crying, no confrontation, no chaos, just clarity. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw someone who had just crossed an invisible line. The wedding would continue exactly as planned. Smiles, music, guests, vows. Nothing outwardly would change. But inside, something had already shifted permanently, and I knew this was no longer about a single ruined dress. It was about everything that had been hidden behind polite faces for far too long. I remember the exact moment Emma walked downstairs like nothing had happened. She was smiling, calm, almost glowing, thanking me again for helping with her dress as if the morning had been ordinary. For a split second, something in my chest tightened. It felt like guilt trying to surface, uncomfortable and uninvited. But I pushed it down quickly, forcing myself back into the version of me that everyone expected, because I had already justified everything to myself. I told myself I wasn't doing anything unforgivable. I told myself it was just emotion, just years of being pushed aside. Ryan had changed. Our family dynamic had changed. Emma had become the center of everything, and I had slowly been pushed into the background of my own life. I kept replaying every canceled dinner, every moment Ryan chose her side of the world over mine. That was what I held on to whenever doubt tried to creep in. So when Emma smiled at me, I smiled back. I helped her adjust the veil, smoothing the fabric carefully like nothing inside me had shifted. My hands felt steady, but my thoughts were not. There was a strange tension in the air. I couldn't fully explain, like something invisible was building beneath the surface of the day. Meanwhile, Emma was different in a way I didn't fully understand yet. She moved through the preparations with quiet control, responding politely, staying composed through hair, makeup, and last-minute details. No anger, no panic, nothing that would hint at what she had seen earlier. If I had known what she already knew, I would have looked closer. From Emma's side of the room, everything appeared almost too controlled. She sat still while the stylist worked, answering questions softly, nodding at the right moments. But I didn't know that inside her, everything had already been rearranged. She wasn't reacting. She was calculating. During the pre-ceremony photos, she pulled me aside briefly. Her best friend Lauren and two of her cousins were nearby, adjusting outfits and laughing softly, completely unaware of what was about to shift. Emma didn't raise her voice. She didn't even change her expression much. She simply showed them something on her phone. The footage. I didn't hear what was said. I only saw the way their expressions changed. The laughter stopped. The curiosity disappeared, replaced with something sharper, more serious. Shock, then disbelief, then silence that carried more weight than any argument. I expected chaos, questions, immediate confrontation. But it didn't come. Instead, Emma just put her phone away and continued getting ready like nothing had happened. That was what unsettled me the most, because the truth wasn't being shouted. It was being shared quietly, carefully, like a thread being pulled through the fabric of the entire morning without anyone noticing yet. And I had no idea how many people had already started seeing it. The ceremony felt like something suspended outside of time. Soft music drifted through the garden at Willow Creek Estate, blending with the rustle of leaves and the quiet anticipation of hundreds of guests. Everything looked carefully arranged, almost unreal in its perfection. I stood at the aisle's edge, holding on to my composure like it was the only thing keeping me steady. Ryan was waiting for me. The way he looked at me should have erased every doubt in my mind. His eyes carried warmth, certainty, love that felt grounded and familiar. As I walked toward him, every step echoed louder in my chest than in the open air. When our hands finally met, it felt like the world narrowed down to just that moment between us. I meant every word of my vows, every promise, every breath. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't distracted in the way people might assume. I was present, fully, even as something deeper inside me remained alert and awake. Because in the back of my mind, I kept seeing it. Brooke's hands tearing through my dress. That single image refused to leave, no matter how beautifully everything unfolded in front of me. It didn't disrupt my voice, but it stayed like a second layer behind every smile I gave. The ceremony continued flawlessly, yet I could already sense something subtle shifting among the guests closest to me. Small glances, quiet murmurs, a tension I didn't need to explain to understand. The family side on my left had begun whispering, not loudly, not enough to disturb the moment, but enough for me to notice the change in energy. Conversations paused when I looked their way, eyes lowered, then shifted back toward Brooke more than once, as if pieces were already connecting in their minds. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Brooke, standing among them, smiled through the entire ceremony like she belonged perfectly in that space. Her expression was practiced, controlled, almost convincing. When Ryan and I said, "I do," she clapped along with everyone else, lifting her chin slightly as if nothing in her world had been shaken. But I could see it differently now. To her, this moment wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement she believed she had already responded to in her own way. She had told herself a story where what she did made sense, where it balanced something she felt had been taken from her. I didn't need to hear her thoughts to understand that she was holding on to her version of justification. She posed for photos afterward with the same polite smile, adjusting her posture whenever a camera turned her way. She still believed she was unseen, still safe inside her assumption that nothing had changed outwardly, but I knew better. Because while she stood there pretending everything was normal, the truth had already begun moving through the room quietly, carried in glances, in silence, in the way people looked at her just a little longer than before. And as I stood beside Ryan, holding his hand, I realized the ceremony was no longer just about vows being exchanged. It had already become something else entirely underneath the surface. The reception should have felt like relief after the ceremony, but instead it carried a strange dual weight. Music played softly across the hall, glasses clinked, and guests moved through conversations that should have been light. I smiled when I needed to, laughed when expected, and stayed close to Ryan during the early moments of the cocktail hour. On the surface, everything looked flawless. Inside, it felt different. There was joy, but it wasn't unguarded anymore. It came layered with something firmer, something controlled. I could feel it in the way I held myself, in the way my attention stayed half on the room instead of fully in it. Lauren stayed nearby, calm and careful, blending into conversations like nothing was out of place. But she had already done what needed to be done. Without drawing attention, she had shown the footage to a few more people I trusted deeply. Not everyone. Just enough. Enough for the truth to begin moving quietly through the crowd like a current no one could see but everyone eventually felt. I didn't announce anything. I didn't react outwardly. I let it spread on its own. That was when the atmosphere started to change. It wasn't sudden. There was no single moment where everything shifted. Instead, it was gradual. Almost unnoticeable at first. Conversations slowed slightly when certain names were mentioned. Smiles held a second too long before fading. People began observing more than engaging. And in the middle of it all, Brooke still smiled. She moved through the reception like everything was normal, greeting guests, posing for photos, standing close to family as if nothing beneath the surface had changed. But I noticed the difference in her now. The way her eyes didn't stay still for long. The way she scanned faces a little too often, as if trying to read something she couldn't find. Her confidence had edges now. I watched her from across the room during the first dance. She clapped with everyone else, but her attention kept breaking. There was hesitation in her movements that hadn't been there before, like she could feel something pressing in from all sides but couldn't identify the source. Meanwhile, I stayed still inside my own calm. I let the tension exist without interrupting it. No confrontation yet, no exposure in full, just awareness building quietly in the space between people. Brooke's perspective of the evening was shifting without her full understanding. She started noticing the smallest things first. A cousin looking away too quickly. A group of friends suddenly going quiet when she passed. Aunt Carla avoiding her gaze altogether, focusing on her drink instead. It didn't make sense to her at first, which made it worse. Then she saw Emma's friends gathered near a table, leaning close over a phone. Their expressions changed the moment she approached. The laughter disappeared instantly, replaced with something unreadable. One of them slipped the phone away too fast. That moment lingered. Because it wasn't loud, it wasn't direct, but it was enough to twist something inside her. By the time the reception lights softened and the music shifted into slower rhythm, the room no longer felt the same to either of us. One of us was watching everything unfold with control. The other was starting to feel what it meant to be watched without knowing how long it had already been happening. After the parent dances ended, the atmosphere in the hall felt softer for a moment, like the event had settled into its final rhythm. Music flowed gently. Lights dimmed into warm tones, and guests assumed the night was simply moving toward its peaceful conclusion. Ryan and I stepped back onto the dance floor for another slow song, his hand steady on my waist, mine resting on his shoulder as if nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had already shifted. I didn't look around too much. I didn't need to. I could feel the room the way you feel. Weather changing before a storm arrives. Conversations were quieter than before. Attention slightly more focused, like people were unconsciously waiting for something they couldn't name. Lauren stood near the side of the hall. Our eyes met once, briefly. That was enough. I gave her the signal. It wasn't dramatic, just a small, almost invisible nod, the kind of movement no one would notice unless they were already looking for it. But she understood immediately. A second later, the projector screen at the far end of the hall flickered. The slideshow that had been playing our wedding highlights froze mid-image. Smiling photos from earlier moments of the day hung suspended for half a heartbeat. Then the screen went completely dark. Silence spread faster than sound ever could. People began to look up, confused at first, thinking it was a technical glitch. A few guests chuckled softly, assuming it would reset, but it didn't. Instead, a new frame appeared. The footage began. Clear, sharp, unmistakable, time-stamped. There was no music over it, no soft filter, no attempt to soften what was being shown. Just raw reality. Brooke in the bridal suite, my wedding dress in her hands, the deliberate tear through the lace, slow enough to be intentional, harsh enough to be undeniable. Every movement was visible. Every pause between decisions felt heavier in hindsight. Then her voice, low but clear enough to carry intent, whispering words that didn't belong anywhere near a day like this. The attempt to repair it followed immediately after. Shaking hands, panic setting in too late. The sewing kit appearing like a desperate afterthought that could never undo what had already been chosen. The entire hall froze. At first, there was confusion. A collective hesitation, like the room itself was trying to understand what it was watching. Then recognition spread. Then disbelief. Then shock that rippled outward until it reached every corner of the venue. Gasps rose almost in unison. 200 guests reacting at once. Chairs shifting, glasses lowering mid-air, conversations collapsing instantly. People leaned forward without thinking, as if proximity could somehow change what was already undeniable. I kept my expression steady. Ryan's grip on my hand tightened slightly, but he didn't speak, neither did I. There was nothing immediate to say that wouldn't be swallowed by what was unfolding in front of us. The footage didn't pause. It continued playing, scene after scene, leaving no space for interpretation or denial. Every second added weight to what the room was already beginning to understand. And in that silence filled with collective shock, the truth finally stopped being something whispered between a few people. It became something everyone had to witness at the same time. I didn't understand what was happening at first. One moment I was standing among guests, still trying to convince myself everything would pass as normal. And the next, my entire world was on a screen larger than anything I could escape. My face, my hands, my mistakes unfolding in front of 200 people who suddenly stopped seeing me the way they always had. The hall didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like exposure. Every second of that footage played louder in my head than it did through the speakers. I saw myself tearing through the wedding dress, the motion sharp and irreversible. I saw the anger I had buried for so long finally spilling out into something visible. Then came the shift I had tried to prevent from the beginning. The panic, the frantic stitching, the realization that fixing it was impossible anymore. But seeing it through everyone else's eyes was different. It stripped away every justification I had held onto. Ryan stood frozen beside Emma. I watched his expression drain in real time, like something inside him had collapsed without warning. The warmth that always defined him was gone, replaced by something I had never seen before. Disbelief first, then something heavier, hurt, that didn't need words. Around us, the room changed in waves. People who had known me since childhood were no longer looking at me the same way. Some turned their heads entirely. Others stared too long, as if trying to reconcile the version of me they remembered with the one they were now forced to accept. My mother's face stood out the most. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just looked devastated in a way that felt heavier than any accusation. I couldn't breathe properly. When the footage finally ended, there was a brief silence that felt louder than anything before it. The screen went dark again, but nothing in the room reset with it. Whatever had been shown stayed suspended in everyone's mind. Then Emma stepped forward. She didn't rush. She didn't shout. She simply took the microphone as if she had already prepared for this moment long before the day began. Her voice was steady, controlled, and painfully calm. She didn't add emotion where it wasn't needed. She didn't exaggerate what everyone had just seen. She only named it. Truth without noise. That made it worse. I remember trying to say something, but no words came out in time to matter. The room was no longer waiting for explanations. It had already decided what it understood. Ryan turned to me then. Not angrily, not loudly, just with finality. You need to leave, he said. 3 words, simple, absolute. There was no argument after that. No space to rebuild or explain. The distance between us widened instantly, not physically at first, but in everything that mattered. I stood there while the realization settled fully into my chest. This wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't a moment I could walk away from and recover later. It was permanent, public, irreversible. And as I looked around the room one last time, I understood that the version of me everyone thought they knew had already been erased in front of them. The reception didn't end the way weddings are supposed to end. There was no seamless return to celebration, no easy laughter restoring the atmosphere. Instead, everything carried a strange weight, as if the air itself had changed after what everyone had witnessed. Music still played softly in the background, but it no longer belonged to the same moment. Some guests stayed out of politeness, lingering in small clusters, speaking in low voices. Others left quietly, offering brief hugs or awkward goodbyes that felt heavier than usual. A few came to me directly, holding my hands a little longer than necessary, as if trying to silently communicate support without reopening what had just unfolded. I remember feeling oddly distant from it all, like I was observing my own life from just outside it. Ryan stayed close to me through the remainder of the night. During what became our final slow dance, he held me tighter than before, as if trying to anchor something that had already shifted. There was regret in his voice when he finally spoke about Brooke, not in defense of her, but in recognition of something he had failed to see. He admitted he should have noticed earlier, should have understood the tension building beneath the surface. I didn't need perfection from him in that moment. I only needed honesty. And he gave me that. In the days that followed, the world slowly adjusted to what had happened. Life didn't pause, but it changed shape. Conversations shifted away from shock into reflection. Some people checked in more than once. Others quietly stepped back. Ryan and I moved forward carefully, rebuilding trust in ways that didn't feel dramatic, but were deeply intentional. Our marriage didn't break under what happened. If anything, it settled into something more grounded, less naive, more aware of how fragile unspoken emotions can be when left unchecked. Brooke's presence became something handled from a distance. She entered therapy, something Ryan insisted on not out of punishment, but necessity. Boundaries were set, not as revenge, but as structure where there had been none before. It wasn't easy for him, but it was clear he understood that avoiding the issue was no longer possible. For me, the quiet aftermath was its own emotional landscape. I protected my peace carefully, choosing what to engage with and what to step away from. Yet even in the calm, there was a mix of relief and sadness that didn't resolve quickly. Relief that the truth was no longer hidden, sadness for how it had surfaced at all. From Brooke's side, everything had collapsed in a different way. She didn't just lose control of a moment. She lost the version of herself she had been protecting for years. The jealousy that had lived quietly inside her was no longer private. It had a witness now, a permanent shape in the memory of everyone who saw it. She lost Ryan in a way that wasn't loud or dramatic, but absolute. Not just his trust in that moment, but something deeper that couldn't simply be rebuilt with time or apology. And what stayed with me most was this: I hadn't needed to raise my voice for everything to change. In the quiet that followed everything, I kept replaying that day in my mind, not because I wanted to relive the chaos, but because I needed to understand what it really meant. A wedding is supposed to be remembered for joy, for beginnings, for promises that shape a future. Mine became something else entirely, not because of a single moment, but because of what was finally revealed underneath everything that had been unspoken. I made a choice that still feels steady when I think about it now. I didn't let someone take over the most important day of my life. I didn't turn it into noise or chaos, even when I could have justified it. Instead, I let the truth speak in its own way. I didn't need to raise my voice for it to be heard. I only needed to let it be seen. That realization stayed with me more than anything else. I learned that silence, when it comes from clarity and not fear, can carry more force than reaction. It doesn't erase what hurt, but it changes how I carry it. It replaces confusion with understanding, and that shift changes everything that follows. I didn't feel like I was winning something in that moment. It wasn't about victory. It was about not letting distortion define my reality. What stayed with me most was how simple truth became once it was finally visible. There was no longer anything to guess. No need to replay small signs or question my instincts. Everything had a shape now, something undeniable that couldn't be rewritten by time or apology. From the other side, I know that single moment didn't stay contained either. One action that came from emotion didn't remain private the way it was intended. It spread outward, changing how every person in that room understood what they were seeing. What was meant to be hidden became permanent in memory. It wasn't just about what happened. It was about how it looked when everything was finally uncovered. That image doesn't fade easily. Once people see something that shifts their understanding of you, it becomes part of how they remember you, even when time passes. I understand now that consequences aren't always loud. Sometimes they settle quietly into relationships, into trust, into the way people look at you when words are no longer needed. What I carried forward wasn't just the memory of betrayal, but the understanding that truth has its own timing. It arrives when it is ready, not when it is comfortable. And once it arrives, it doesn't need help to change everything around it. That wedding didn't just mark a beginning for me. It marked a turning point in how I understood silence, truth, and everything that exists between the two.